Thank you for tuning into Splat Attack. This episode, we will be having a versus battle between Are You Afraid of the Dark's The Tale of the Dark Music and Goosebumps' Stay Out of the Basement with special guest Courtland from Up All Night Podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you are listening on a podcast app, please leave us a review. One of our goals in 2023 is to continue to grow the reach of this podcast, and these two simple actions will help us achieve that goal. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our Patreon. We have bonus episodes, live streams, early access, and more. Go to patreon.com/splatattack. Now grab your flashlights and let's head into the basement.
Basement!
Get back upstairs!
Kids, I'm sorry I raised my voice. I just don't want you down in the basement.
Hi, Andy. Won't you come play with me?
I was wondering if my husband was there. I'm a little worried. He was supposed to be home hours ago.
Time to pack away our holiday decorations in a place kids fear most. Welcome to Splat Attack, a 90s podcast that dives into our slime-filled past. I'm your vengeful paperboy, Brett.
And I'm your plant father, Alex. And Brett, what are we doing in our basement today?
Well, now that Christmas and New Year's have passed, there's really no reason to keep all these ornaments out any longer, decorations as well. So I decided to store all these boxes of lights and Santa tchotchkes down here until next year.
You might want to consider putting them up in a closet upstairs instead.
Oh, why's that?
Because the basements that we're venturing into today are creepy beyond belief.
Wait. What's down here that I don't know about?
Wouldn't you like to know?
That was awfully ominous of you. Well, we can all agree, basements are areas of the house that can be scary, right up there with attics. There's just something about going down into the ground away from all the activity to where things not thought about often dwell, including creatures that seek prey in the deepest, darkest corners of junk piles. So today, in our fourth Are You Afraid of the Dark vs. Goosebumps episode of our podcast, which is the second one on our main timeline, the other two are on Patreon if you want to check those out, we will dare to dive deep into the depths of the cold, dark basements to find out which story is the one true Fright Fest, the tale of the dark music, or stay out of the basement. But before we do, let's introduce our guest for today, somebody who has a little bit of experience with both of these stories and is a fan of both Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps as well. Let's unpack this water cooler crate to unveil our guest, actually. It got shipped here straight from downtown, and I'm dying to see what's inside. I think it might be from United Hospital or, somewhere where the Bronze work. So it shipped all the way to Splat Attack Studios from good old Michigan State is none other than Courtland from Up All Night Podcast.
Woo! It's me!
I just used my crowbar to unbox you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
How you doing today, Courtland? Did you have enough air in there?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I had a lot of packing peanuts. They just hold so much air. I could just suck them out. It's fine. I'm fine.
There you go. That's how you survive. Or get a
Right.
snorkel. That works.
Yeah, it's whatever. Good.
Yeah.
Just like over, just Christmas packages being late. Whatever.
Yeah, I hear you there. Well, we're so glad to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you've been up to.
Well, I got to say, thanks so much for inviting me over to talk about two fantastic basement style episodes. Really good ones you picked for some Goosebumps versus Are You Afraid of the Dark for sure. So I do one of the hosts for the Up All Night Horror Anthology podcast, where we've covered every episode of both Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps, except for the last 4 of Are You Afraid of the Dark. We're going to get to that later. So yeah, I'm really excited to be able to talk about them. I love talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark in my spare time, and I just don't know anybody else in my life that I can talk with. So I'm glad I get two additional experts here that I can kind of riff with, you know?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I remember when I first met you, like around 2019, when you're starting out your Are You Afraid of the Dark podcast, and I think I don't know if it was actually like right on Phantom Cab when you started, or if I like started to get really engaged with conversations on your podcast through actually dark music. But I really appreciate the journey that we kind of shared together in tandem through our Instagram journey.
Absolutely. It's been so much fun watching you grow as an artist. I mean, I just love your artwork. So it's awesome. Yeah,
And
I love that you guys started a
podcasting.
podcast. I'm so glad you guys started a podcast, and it's exciting.
You made it look too fun, Courtland.
I have that effect on people.
Well, since both episodes that we're talking about today are basement themed, as Courtland had pointed out, what experience do the two of you have with basements? Have you ever encountered a creepy basement in your childhood?
Good question.
I did. So when I think about basements, or at least when I thought about them as a kid, there's one thing that immediately comes to mind: Home Alone. There's there's one particular scene where Kevin McAllister is like going downstairs to do laundry or something like that, and he notices that this weird like furnace thing is like lighting up, like glowing red, and is talking to him or making all these weird strange noises, and it freaks him out to the point where he drops his laundry, runs back upstairs. Eventually he does get over it, and he like talks back to the furnace monster, and it shuts up. But for some reason that memory has always stuck with me throughout my childhood. And there were even moments where I'm trying to not get too much into detail, but my dad used to play pranks on me as a kid, and one of the ones involved like him turning off the lights and like racing me to the top, and whoever didn't get to the top first had to stay down there. And of course, with my wild imagination, I could only imagine what was lurking down there in the darkness. And, you know, he'd often tease me and say things like, "Oh, beware of the furnace monster. He's going to get you." Or, you know, the boogeyman. And, you know, the moment my Doug caliber imagination just flew off the handle and thought about like red eyes or like an evil smile in the basement grinning at me, I was like, "Nope, get me out of here. Help, open up." And then of course, you know, after like a couple of seconds he'd let me out, and then my mom would say, "Why do you do that to him? You're going to traumatize him for life." And you know, it turns out that even despite those little antics, this is like both of these are some of my most memorable favorite episodes of each respective show. So I guess somehow trauma can process itself to a point of from fear to love when you let time sink in and you allow to rewatch it and analyze what's going on there.
Well, I feel that there's two types of basements. There's the finished nice basements that are just like an expansion of your home that you can hang out, watch TV and stuff like that. Those are great. But there's also the unfinished basements, which are pretty much all the basements that I grew up with. So I'm right there with you. I had the creepy basements. Brandon, my co-host, he had the creepy basements too. And they're the ones where like, you know, you're just so scared of being down there with like the power going out and you're just like in utter blackness and you're like, well, this is how I die, you know?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of basements I grew up with. I didn't have like central air or air conditioning growing up either. And, you know, I'm in Michigan, so it doesn't get too bad like most of the year, but the summers, they get really wet, you know, there's a lot of wetness in the air and stuff. And so that's where we had like our Sega Genesis downstairs because it was cold. So we would hang out down there. And I had a couple of older brothers, so it wasn't so bad. But I do remember, you know, talking about lights going out. We were down there one time and the power went out. It was just utter blackness and like, you know, the basement, but like, you don't know it when it's dark, you know? So just like clawing your way to get to the stairs is just, it's the worst, you know? It's the worst.
I totally resonate with that. Like just the idea that something black hiding in the darkness could grab your foot at any moment and pull you back down. It's it's something that would linger in your nightmares for a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We actually did talk about Are You Afraid of the Dark? I mean, the Tale of the Dark music specifically when we had our 30th anniversary reunion last year.
Nice.
And DJ mentioned that one of the inspirations for the Tale of the Dark music was how like he was at a friend's house one day and he was curious about like this weird looking door in the back of the unfinished basement, and his friend told him, well, you don't want to go in there. And of course it got him curious, and he wrote a story about it. So the rest is history.
I feel like every basement has that too, you know, because like Brandon's basement did. I still don't even know what could have been in that room, and you know, it's too late for me to find out now, but I just assume it's a monster.
If it's not a root cellar or a crawl space, chances are it's a monster who is camped out just waiting to eat children.
Exactly. Yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah, I just wish they were the friendly type of monster, not the demonic kind that we might encounter today.
I mean, hey, as long as they give me a bicycle, I'm cool with it.
Did Coda turn into the shiny red bicycle for Ricky to use?
Oh, he turned into the shiny yellow bicycle. I don't know why that bicycle was yellow. Should have been red, but
should have.
Whatever.
We'll talk more about that when we get to the story category.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. Just write that under me, Alex. Alex, is there anything you want to add about basement memories or what we're talking about?
Well, and I had mentioned this before, that I was a very, very frightful child as a kid. And the older I got, and I had mentioned this in our previous episode, our Rugrats Santa Experience episode, that every Christmas I would go to my grandparents and I'd get bored because everybody was older than me. And I'd end up going into the basement. And the basement was one that Courtland had given a very apt description of, with the unfinished basement. But it was also where my uncle stayed. His room was in the basement. So you still had the entertainment center and the bed and a couch off to the side. And there was a door that would go straight out. So there was still a nice clear exit, but behind it was just all storage stuff. There was another wall behind. And it was still unfinished. You still had the cement all over and the pillars, and it still had this really dank cellar feel. But as a kid, I was terrified to go down there. As a teenager, I was getting a little more bold, and he eventually moved out, but most of his stuff was still down there. And then little by little, it was gone. And then I would just end up bringing my TV monitor and my PlayStation and would hook it up and play games while I'm down there. And then one year, I got a little brave and I tried my first horror-based game. And I played Fear Effect 2 in the basement, that unfinished basement with just one light on, which was right by me. And anytime there was anything creepy that happened in that game, I'd pause it and I'd look around the room just to make sure there's nothing going on, and then I'd unpause and play a little more, then I'd have to pause it again and check everything out. It was really eerie playing that in the basement. Wasn't nearly as eerie playing it in my room, but that's probably the most frightening encounter experience that I've had in any basement. Nothing happened, obviously. It was just an eerie setting to play that type of game.
Yeah, I think you just unlocked another basement memory for me.
Oh no!
I'm trying to keep them behind the vault of my subconscious, but they like to peek out once in a while. So around like, I don't know, 2016, 2017, back when my dad was married to his second wife, I would come over and sleep over on occasion because her son, my step brother, I guess, was into video games and stuff like that. And I remember one night I decided to like sleep downstairs because I got sick of sleeping on the couch. And so I was in their half finished, half unfinished basement. I was in the finished part, but I was in a corner that was like next to the unfinished part where the water boiler was. And I was on this like lumpy futon. And I don't know what happened that night, but I woke up around like 2 a.m. when the water boiler turned off and I heard some like faint breathing. And it was just like, it's like if someone was sitting next to you in a corner of the darkness, just going like, and I like, when I heard that, okay, I'm done. I'm sleeping upstairs on the couch again. I didn't want to find out what was making that noise. And it happened a couple of occasions, not just one. And I never found out what it was, but I did see like a weird shadow near the water boiler then. So don't sleep in basements. It's not worth it. The back pain on the couch is better. So before we formally dive into our verses, here's some episode info for all you Slimesters so you can keep track of what's what. So for the Tale of the Dark music, This was Season 1, Episode 11 of Are You Afraid of the Dark? It was directed by Ron Oliver and written by DJ McHale, and it was also told by Eric of the Midnight Society. It aired October 24th, 1992. As for Stay Out of the Basement, this was also Season 1, Episode 11, and also Episode 12 since it was a two-parter. It was directed by William Fruitt and written for TV by Billy Brown and Dan Angel, and aired January 27th, 1996. Of course, the original book was written by R.L. Stine. And it was also one of the few book covers that was not illustrated by Tim Jacobus. Instead, the book cover was illustrated by Jim Thiessen, who would also do the book cover for Be Careful What You Wish For, because Tim Jacobus was unavailable at that time to illustrate for R.L. Stine.
Brett, what are the categories that you are going to be judging for?
Sure. So for these two basement-themed episodes today, I'll be judging using the following categories. First up, we have story. Then we have main characters. Then we have villain third. Then use of the basement theme for fourth. And finally, creepiness. Because I think basements are a little bit creepier than they are scary. So I wanted to explore that space a bit. All right, guys. I appreciate the little introduction, but I think it's time to put away the boxes and get it on with this versus. And starting off, we will go with Courtland. Tell us about the story of the Tale of the Dark music.
Yeah, so I love the I love the story of the Tale of the Dark music. It has so many layers to it that I think are not in some of the other episodes of both Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, because it has like this aura of mystery. Like you're not sure exactly where this monster even comes from. So the story is that Andy is the main character. He gets a new house. His uncle had passed away and they inherited this house, but he knew nothing about this uncle. He's never met him before, just somebody in the family, whatever. So he gets into this house and he just can't go into the basement without playing music, apparently. So every time you play music in this basement, the root cellar opens up and there's a monster in there. And it wants to eat. It's hungry. So as the story progresses, Andy visits this monster a couple of times on accident because he doesn't know what's going on until he figures out, oh, it's music. Music's what makes this monster come out. He's kind of tormented by a bully because he's a new kid in town and he does this little paper route to help bring in money for his family. And he ends up luring the bully into the basement, and then he starts playing some music and he doesn't stop until it's too late. One of the great things about the story, though, is just kind of the mystery around the uncle, because like the mom is like, oh, my uncle, I don't know much about him. They found him dead at the basement, at the bottom of the stairs. And then she stops talking about that story. So it's got like history to it. I like to imagine like how many people did the uncle lure into the basement, because obviously he knew about it until the monster was like, all right, you're too old or whatever. I need somebody new. Who invited them to own the house? Was it the monster that sent it out? There's just a lot of like really thought-provoking things about the story that can kind of keep you wondering and guessing, and I just really like it.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. It's really interesting the way it's written, where everything that's in the periphery that you can't really see but sense, it just raises more questions so that you can expand the story further if you wanted to. Like, what happened before with Uncle Niles and his like rise to fame and fortune, and then what happens later that I can't really spoil unless you want to go into it for the story. So I think if they ever wanted to do a sequel of this or a prequel, there's a lot of material to work with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alex, will you tell us about the story of Stay Out of the Basement, please?
Absolutely. Since we are on the topic of story, I do want to point out that there are... It depends on the story, to be honest, because Are You Afraid of the Dark typically has less story time to tell than Goosebumps does, which at times is a benefit and a detriment on both parties, because Are You Afraid of the Dark has got the bumpers in between of the Midnight Society and then the actual tale that they're telling. Goosebumps doesn't have that. It just goes right into the story, and there's only one episode that, or one tale that takes two parts in Are You Afraid of the Dark. There is quite a few two-parters for Goosebumps, and this is one of those instances. And I will say that I think this pairing of these two episodes is very, very good, because the shorter format works really, really well for Tale of the Dark Music, and the longer format for Stay Out of the Basement also really helps. So I just find that really interesting, and it's usually a good thing to point out whenever you have a weaker episode, clearly a weaker episode in storytelling, but this one, they're both very solid. But this episode, the Stay Out of the Basement, you have your main characters, which is a brother-sister duo, which we'll get into later. But mom is leaving. She's got to go check on an aunt who is not doing well. She's in the hospital, so she's going to go out, take care of that. So the kids are left alone with dad, and Margaret is not too happy about this, because dad has changed. He's not as pleasant and as alert and as attentive as he used to be. Even remarks that he had stopped calling her princess. But he's so enwrapped into whatever his work is that he's doing down in the basement. And for the majority of both of these episodes, there have been one reason after another that these two kids have had to go down into the basement. And I will also say, well, I'll get to that when we get to main characters. I don't want to do that just yet. But there is quite a few reasons that they have to go into this basement, and every time they do, it is like a greenhouse, essentially. There's plants everywhere, which is why, for this reason, for those of you who are listening, my background is an episode of Batman the Animated Series with Poison Ivy. One, because Kevin Conroy, rest in peace, and two, Poison Ivy. I think she's an extremely underrated character, especially for the animated series. Anyway, but this episode, the main story for it is the dad is becoming more and more angry as the story progresses, and the kids are becoming more and more defensive and more desperate, and it almost seems like it teeters on being an abusive father. And then it turns into being afraid for your life, because dad is really being extremely aggressive. And even at one point, they feel that he has murdered somebody who came in to check on him and check on his work. And the plants are also attacking these kids. They reach for them whenever they're in the basement. When they're outside, there's a plant that reaches outside and wraps around the little brother. And they have remarked that it feels like the plants are breathing. You can hear them breathing. And eventually what turns out to happen was he was doing some genetic slicing and was trying to take some of the best attributes of certain plants and combine them to make the perfect plant. But what he ended up doing was making a clone in some form, where it was a plant-based clone of himself. And the daughter ended up having to confront which one is the plant and which one is the real person. And it seemed like even then, even the human had been infected by the plant. So they're still both very, very similar, and they both could be defeated in the same way. But again, we'll get to that a little more. But the main thing is that dad was doing some genetic slicing of plants, and the plants have come alive, and the kids are in definite mortal danger.
Cool. I'm kind of curious, Alex. Have you read the Stay Out of the Basement Goosebumps book before?
I have not. I've not read any of it. No, I've read one. I've read one Goosebumps book, and it was with Sam. That was his bedtime stories whenever he first started learning to read.
I wanted to point out for anyone who likes both the TV show and the books themselves, I did read this in preparation for it in case we needed to use it for anything, for arguments. And I did note some differences between the story and the TV show. Nothing too major, but I do want to point it out that there is a third character called Diane, who's like their friend with Margaret and Casey. She's kind of a throwaway character who just kind of antagonizes other characters here and there. So I don't see, the point of really adding her into the TV show. It didn't really take away from anything. But the other couple of things that I noticed with the story is how violent and graphic some of the details were near the climax. Particularly when Dr. Brewer was explaining his experiment. He said he wasn't using the DNA to create the perfect plant. He was actually doing plant-animal hybrids. And when he cut himself on a slide, he like started oozing green ooze, like chlorophyll or something to that extent, instead of just blood. And it got to the point where when they had the final face-off between the two Dr. Brewers, like one of the real ones and the plant copy, one of them had an axe in their hand and was like threatening to chop the other one up. And they're, them and the kids were trying to figure out what's going on here until finally Margaret, did the test to see who's the real dad, not just by seeing which one called her princess, but also actually going as far as to like prick the other one, like stab him with like a little knife to see what color they bled. And as soon as she found out, her real dad bled red blood instead of green, she literally like took an axe and
We can rule the world.
tomahawked the fake one right in half, and then he split apart. And that's really graphic for a kid's book, especially back in 1992. Like, I don't know how you feel about Goosebumps books like the original 62 or even more modern iterations, but the like first 13 of them, they're just like, they're really dark. And I didn't know how I missed that when I first read it as a kid. So if anyone wants to read more into that, obviously go get the book. It's pretty fun. But that threw me for a loop when I first read it.
That sounds awesome. That also very much reminds me of Wizard of Oz. Because Wizard of Oz is incredibly graphic. My son had fallen in love with the Judy Garland movie, and we had the novel, and he wanted us to sit down, and every night we'd read a chapter. And imagining the Tin Man just going to town killing dozens of animals with that goofy doofus grin.
He's just sitting there whacking stuff with axes.
Yeah.
Who needs to chop wood when you can chop bodies?
If I only had a heart.
It's a Tin Man way of life.
Yeah. Well, we're not a classic literature podcast, so we won't be covering that anytime soon unless you want to pay for it on Patreon. Okay, so I think I've heard enough about both. But before I move on to the next category, I'm curious, how would you make the story better? Like, what element would use or plot point to enhance the story as it is now?
Well, I think that dark music is a pretty tight episode, which is what makes it so good. There's not a lot of unnecessary moments in it, I think, because you get the scenes with the bully, you get that kind of relationship with the main character. You get the relationship between him and his little sister and his mom, and you get enough of the monster to be exciting because you see him in a couple of different forms, which is really cool. There's not anything that I think I could take away from the episode to make it better. I like that there's that mystery of the uncle, so I don't think there's really anything I'd want to add to it. It's got Vink's hand in it, so I think it's perfect.
Actually, I have it right here. Oh, damn green screen.
I damn thee!
I found it while I was searching the basement in this Versus. Slimesters, if anyone's curious where I got this from, I had a friend who did Sardo's Magic Mansion on Instagram, and he made like Are You Afraid of the Dark replicas. So if you're interested in that sort of thing and he's still operational, definitely check him out. I also got things like the carved stone from him. And
those are so cool.
The Twisted Claw, Zebo's Nose, a lot of fun stuff. Super specs. Highly recommend it. But that's side tangents. Alex, do you feel anything could be changed or added to enhance your story?
To piggyback on Brett, that Instagram is Sardo's _Magic Mansion, and he is still on Instagram and has got some great stuff. So go share the love, show some support. Much like Courtland, I think it's a very, very solid 2-part episode. I actually think it's one of the better ones. There's very little, if anything, that I would really do differently. The only thing that I would probably do different, just because I think pacing wise it would really punch up the climax, is if we did less of the amount of times the brother and sister had to go in the basement. Maybe take one of those out and substitute it with right after they had got the answering machine. And they heard the wife of the doctor calling in, wanting to know where he is. He's supposed to be home hours ago. And then then Dad walks in or starts to get into the house, and then they're scurrying. I would have liked it a little better if Dad was already in the room and had overheard that they now know this has happened, and now they have to run for their lives, and goes into the climax, and you can flesh it out a little more with them in the basement and the different plants trying to attack, and with her finger having been pricked earlier.
What happened to your finger?
I pricked it on one of the thorns.
There could also be a clone version of her that is beginning to make, just to give a little more danger at the end, punch it up just a little more. But as is, I think it's fantastic.
Cool. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Let's move on to main characters of each of these stories. Courtland?
So the main character of the Tale of the Tale of Laughing in the Dark. So the dark music.
Because I showed you that Zevo knows.
Yep, I had it on my mind. The main character of the Tale of the Dark Music is Andy, and he's kind of like he's very relatable to a lot of kids, I'm sure. Like moving into a new area, having to help support the family by getting a paper route, being scared of the basement. Like it's kind of like a lot of kids, you know. So it's a very relatable character. I like him. He's a quick thinker, you know. He has his bully gets the upper hand for a minute, but he kind of gets the last laugh in the end of their relationship and things. He's got that sister that he has to deal with, you know. So you're just kind of there along the way with Andy, and I do like that. I mean, can I contrast a little bit to Stay Out of the Basement?
Yeah, if you want to.
Like not having to share the spotlight is kind of in favor for this episode. I think it works really well to have just a solitary main character that you can more so relate with. He's cool. I like him. He's crafty. He gets stuff done. He does the laundry every other scene. He's great.
I bet he's great with washing whites by now.
The only problem is he puts tarps in the laundry. I don't know what he's doing there, but like, you know, and his art, not gonna lie, his art's not very good.
No, I'm glad you pointed both of those things out because I connect with both of them equally. Like my dad's, you know, a builder architect. So when I was a kid, I had the hose off tarps in the backyard and then fold them after they air dried. If I tried to put like that into a washing machine, it would blow up and create like a you know, like one of those comical cartoon explosion spurts on the wall. And as for drawing goes, he's just using like basic Crayola marker. If you're really scared of something, you really got to get into the detail and ramp up the gruesomeness.
Mm-hmm. Shading, blending, all that good stuff.
Yeah, Instagram worthy.
right. Yeah, his drawing was a bit elementary.
That's fair. I did put main characters with an S for these categories because I want to explore some of the other ones, not just like the focal character of these tales. So feel free to elaborate on, you know, anyone like the mom or the bully or anyone else you feel is worth mentioning that's pivotal to the story. Both of you.
Andy's kind of got it weird because he's got the bully Coda, who kind of torments him throughout the episode, but he also has a sister Christine who also kind of torments him through the episode. So poor Andy, he's just got it bad both ways, you know. Christine she's something else. You know, I just love the scene where she's sitting there playing video games and the mom's like, hey, can you do the laundry? Even though Andy just did it 5 minutes ago. And she's like, no, I'm playing video games, you know, beedly-doo. She's having a good time.
Chris, go down and put the clothes in the laundry for me, okay? Christina?
Mom, I'm busy.
And so I guess Andy has to do it. He's sitting there
That's
drawing,
not
but
fair.
whatever.
If I did that with my parents, I would get a spanking and sent to my room and then have to do the laundry later. But that was the 90s and parents were more aggressive with their
You get a spanking
actions.
And push down the basement stairs.
Yeah, I find it really strange how everyone's really ganging up on Andy in this episode. It's almost like you need to root for him as the underdog so that he can get, you know, a little bit ahead in life because, You got Coda, who's kind of like Roger Klotz light, picking on him, and then you have Christina, who's actually the lonely ghost in the Tale of the Lonely Ghost, as we find out, just kind of doing her thing in the corner. And then you have the mom, who's just in la-di-da land, ignoring everything that Andy's telling her about the danger downstairs. And she's like, oh, there's no monster in the basement. Maybe it's a rat. You know, rats don't talk, but maybe this one does, because we're in Canada. It's interesting, but I think Andy is his own best friend here, because he has to make the decision to stand up for his right to not be picked on or ignored, and fight fire with fire and use something he's afraid of to his advantage. And I really appreciate his ability to, I guess, harness the power of the door by the end of the episode.
Right, because he doesn't have like a best friend that he can fall back on. He doesn't have any family members that are really like supporting of him. It's just Andy, you know.
When you put yourself into his shoes, you can relate, and you can sympathize with the challenges he's facing.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, how about you? Tell us about your main characters.
Both. It is a brother-sister duo. It is Margaret and Casey, and Goosebumps has had its fair share of siblings, and usually one is got the pretty cool level head, and the other one is just annoying to a nauseating degree. This is not that episode. This is not that pair. They're actually both pretty rational. The Margaret is the older of the two, and Casey is the much more laid back. No, everything's okay. He's the one who kind of seemed to be the molder of the situation. Like, no, I don't, it can't be that. Dad can't be doing this kind of a thing. And then she's more the Scully, like, no, the Dad is doing something crazy, and this isn't, Dad's a mad scientist. And throughout the entire episode, Mom, like I said, is gone. So it's very much just the two of them with this, which we find out later to be an imposter dad, and they don't know what's going on. And every time they go in the basement, it's for a legitimate reason, which I think is a really good thing for stories like this, because Goosebumps, sometimes the reason's rational and sometimes it's just dumb. Some of the excuses they give, but or they're incredibly cliched things. This one, not so much. It was Mom is leaving, go get Dad. And they are at the top of the stairs calling down to Dad, and he's not coming up. So they start to go down, and Dad freaks out. And then later they walk past, and they hear this really weird noises from downstairs. And the sister Margaret, she's beginning to wonder. Sister Margaret, she's a nun. She's beginning to wonder if there's animals that are being harmed downstairs, and that would trouble any child, especially one who has a heart for people and animals the way that she seems to do. So, got to make sure that they're okay. And then after that, they come back upstairs, and crap, he dropped his jacket. He left his or not his jacket, his shirt, and which was a reason for that, because when they got down there, it was so hot, because it's a greenhouse. It's very, very hot. So he just takes it off, and then got distracted by everything that's going on. He dropped it, and then they get back upstairs, and he realized, oh crap, my shirt's downstairs. Dad's going to realize that we've been down there, so he's got to go back down there again. And it's reasons like that, logical reasoning that a kid would have, which I thought was great. The only thing that I thought was probably the most illogical thing was when Margaret was trying to rewind the cassette tape on the answering machine. Like, it's fine. Leave it alone. Dad is going to check it later. You didn't check it. You just heard the recording, and then then you heard the door. Run away. You're fine. Dad won't notice that you've been in there. That was probably the biggest lead. But again, that's a kid, and the kid is panicking. So okay, I can forgive that one. But they both look out for each other. They both are trying to give Dad the reasonable doubt as to why he's behaving the way that he is. The way that she figures out that this one is Dad and this one isn't is a really logical step for a child. They're both very strong protagonists. They work well together. Even then, they're playing. You see them playing at one point. Well, Casey is playing video games. Margaret is just off to the side wondering why Dad hasn't eaten breakfast yet. But I get the sense that if Dad had, she'd be playing with him. It's a refreshing thing to see a brother and sister who get along as well as they do, especially in a horror anthology kids show. But very strong, very smart, very reasonable kids, especially in a very unusual situation like the one they're faced with.
Yeah. I find it very interesting how both sets kind of mirror each other in some ways, like with the lesser important one playing video games and the other one like really into the activeness of the plot moving forward. Do you feel that the adults complement the kid characters well in each of your tales, or do you feel that they create some unnecessary friction that kind of get in the way of their development?
While I don't think that the mom in the Tale of the Dark Music is really pivotal to the story, I think that they probably could have done it without her. She just kind of creates unnecessary, dirtiness for Andy to clean up, really.
So would you say Andy's reasons to go into the basement are more or less contrived than Margaret and Casey's reasons?
I think Margaret and Casey's reasons are much more important.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Both the reasons for what both the parents have done make sense. Mom is gone because a family member was just injured, and then she's not come back. And then even when Margaret calls later to say Dad's acting really weird, nothing really bad has happened yet. It's just a little shady things, and Dad has a reputation of getting a little too buried into his work. So you know how he gets, which, okay, that's fine. But it goes way off the deep end later, and before she even gets the chance to call Mom again, Dad has now hidden the phone number of how best to reach him, because again, this is the 90s. They didn't really have cell phones. You had to have a phone number of the hospital that she's going to go visit, and that number is gone, and you don't know where it's at, which now call the police, especially now that there's somebody who's potentially dead in your house. Call the police, which again, going with that, if Dad had been in there, could have held a wire and cut the line to the phone.
Hi. Is there a problem with your service? Yeah, my cable is out. Really?
All right. Well, that's a pretty good summary of our main characters. So let's move on to the villain or villains, depending on how you look at it for each of these tales. Courtland, tell us about the villain of the Tale of the Dark Music, or villains if you find more than one.
Sure. Yeah. So the villain of the Tale of the Dark Music, there's a couple of them. I mean, you got Coda, who is kind of just the bully. You don't like him. He torments our main character, Andy. But there's also this whole, monster in the basement. It's not really named or anything. I guess you could just kind of sum it up as like a boogeyman. It's kind of like a shapeshifter. So this monster, it only comes out when there's music playing in the basement. So it kind of has specific guidelines to be summoned, I suppose. Whereas Coda, he's whatever, he can just come and go as he pleases. But the monster, the cool thing about him is that he does shapeshift. I'm a sucker for shapeshifting monsters. I think they're awesome. I think they can be just so creative and fun, and this episode kind of goes that way. Not only do you have like the red glowing eyes, which I guess is its real form, but you have my background, the doll, and this is probably, in my opinion, one of the creepiest things that Are You Afraid of the Dark has produced.
Hi, Andy. Won't you come play with me? We can have lots of fun. Just come with me.
And it also kind of creates like a carnival barker. I don't know why. Kids love carnivals, I guess. I don't know.
What's the matter, Andy? Don't you want to have some fun?
So you get like a couple of different forms of the monster, which I think is really interesting, really fun. I'd love to see what else it could be and what it can do, but that just kind of leaves it up to your own imagination, which is just cool with me too.
Yeah. I think a lot of earlier Are You Afraid of the Dark tales in particular rely on the less is more approach, where they don't necessarily give you the villain or the thing to be scared of outright, but it kind of teases you with little hints of it. Like, for example, Zebo behind the corner, and you see the hint of his cigar smoker, like his footprint in the pudding when he's trying to creep into Josh's house, or like in the case of the dark music, we see his eyes, but we don't really see what's around those eyes. We could only speculate what his true form is. I did come across some fan art that I saw on the internet. If I find it, I'll put a picture here. But I saw someone's really interesting interpretation that unlocked a memory for me, where we see Andy kind of like pushing back in fear, trying to block what I dubbed the cellar door demon. And it turns out to be this really strange looking crocodile with red beady eyes, like a crocodile style monster with just a big long snout and jaws. And the reason why I bring that up is it reminds me of around the time when I had that basement memory when I was a kid. I was in 3rd grade, and I got first place in the art contest for drawing a demonic looking crocodile with beady red eyes. And of course, after I got the award, I went to the principal office and they asked me, well, why did you draw this? Is there something going on at home? And I'm like, no, I was just drawing something that could be really cool and original looking. And I'm like, yeah, let's take an animal and throw like creepy things on him. Like, let's give it horns and some like drool and maybe some blood on it and red eyes, and they thought I was demented. But
he's evil. That's a wicked mind. Look what he did in art class. Skeletons, headless corpses, monsters devouring human flesh.
After my mom explained to them that I'm just a very imaginative kid, they let me off the hook. So I like to believe that his true form is this just like giant creepy looking crocodile that likes to chomp on kids when he's had enough with his shape-shifting. But one other theory as well, you might have seen it in the pictures I've shown you, either Alex or Courtland, is that he looks very similar to the main villain of this PS1 game that came out at the end of the 90s called Heart of Darkness. And there's like this master of darkness that's trying to unleash a bunch of dark-looking Kingdom Hearts like Heartless into the world to corrupt it. And the main character, funny thing, is also named Andy, that he goes into this other world with his like homemade spaceship from his treehouse, and he has to fight them off in the style of a side-scrolling point-and-click adventure game, similar to like Another World or like the Neverhood. And it really got the gears turning in my head to think, if this guy had like a human form, it would look something like this with the red eyes and the pointy black horns and like the dark robe. So I guess my roundabout way of saying it is I really appreciate the monster's ambiguity, because it really takes you to interesting places to theorize what could happen, and that's part of the charm of your story, Courtland.
I was just going to say, I know you did the Are You Afraid of the Darks versus Goosebumps artwork with another artist on Instagram, and if I remember right, he did the one for Dark Music, right?
Yeah, I actually have the art here, so we can pull it up for all you Slimesters. I drew the Stay Out of the Basement version, and Joe Blastard drew the Dark Music one.
Yeah, I remember seeing his Dark Music one and just really enjoying it, because it kind of goes beyond, it gets that form of imagination that I was talking about, where you don't get to see everything that the demon can be, but his interpretation, he's got like an insect leg, he's got like the octopus tentacle, like those are possibilities, and I love that he kind of explored that part of it too.
I agree. Yeah, it was a great collaboration, and I'm very thankful that it happened. So, Alex, tell us about your villain or villains of Stay Out of the Basement.
Well, Stay Out of the Basement, the main villain is the father, or plant father. The motivation for why he does what he does is a bit unclear. It is said dominance, but if you think about it in a way, I mean, it's the first of its kind, and it's probably needing survival, and very much a invasion of the body snatchers type scenario, I would imagine. But the way he goes about pulling this off, just leave me alone, leave me to my work. He wants to draw as little attention to himself as possible, mostly because he's just in the basement working constantly, and then he wants to make sure that his fake kids are unaware of what's going on. So he's trying to be consoling, and once they're asking questions, like, no, it's okay, I love you, stay out of the basement, please. And after they've again started to question a little more, he tries to put them at ease so they'll leave him alone. If I explained a little bit of what I'm doing, would that make you feel better? Yes, it would. So he attempts to alleviate some of their fears, which just brings about more questions that he doesn't want to answer. So it doesn't really help. But again, he's a plant. And he's got a bed full of bugs that he eats. He's eating plant food. And he is less threatening to them. It is more the plants in the basement that are more a threat to the kids. But for the most part, it's just he's being incredibly vague and very repetitive. And at a few points, especially near the end, he's like, go to your rooms. Why? Do I have to repeat myself? Go back to your room and stay there. Which, as a father, I'm thinking that is not going to fly for kids. But whenever I was a kid, and I was a kid in the 90s, my dad told me that, I'm doing what he says. It's a testament to how things have changed, because back in the 90s, yeah, dad has spoken. I'm gone. I will go to my room and I will stay there till dad says it's okay. But as now, it's Sam, go to your room. Why? Do I have to explain why? Yeah. I will tell you in a few minutes after I've cooled off. Go upstairs. Okay. And I've got to the parenting now is very, very different. Or I should say my parenting and my dad's parenting is very different. Not to say that either one is better, but I know that the frustrations that I had as a kid, and I don't want my son to have those. Mm-hmm. But that seems to be the older way of fathering. It seems to be in the 90s was my word is gold. What I have said is going to take place. Go to your room, stay out of my room, stay out of the basement, do what I tell you. Go upstairs, go play, shoot, leave me alone. And that seems to be it. The villain, what he is doing in the basement is probably the more villainous thing. And the fact that he's attempting to kill another character by turning them into a plant, and also has their real father and attempting to kill him. A lot of the more heinous things he's doing is off screen, but what he's doing to the kids is just get out of the way, leave me alone. I don't want any more attention drawn to me. Shoo. And that's pretty much the main villain.
Yeah, it's almost like he's biding his time until his experiment is ripe for it being sentient and acting on its own. Because near the end, we do see more development with the plant creatures. It starts out with like maybe some vines or a tendril getting stuck on Casey, and then it shows up. A hand starts showing up that grabs him.
I will also point out something. Now, again, I haven't read the book. All I've read is the subtitles of the movie. All I've seen is the episode. But there was one thing I remember very, very clearly. This is one of the episodes I remembered very well as a kid. And Goosebumps, I had said this before in our previous verses, Goosebumps never scared me. Are You Afraid of the Dark terrified me. I had never seen this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark as a kid. It's probably a good thing. This one I did see, and this was one of the very few Goosebumps episodes that really unnerved me, because this idea that I'm alone with Dad, and Dad is a villain, and Dad is trying to make these sentient creatures, and it could affect me, and I am in danger, and I don't know what to do, is really unsettling. And no telling what all is in the basement, and every single time I go down there for a logical reason, Dad's not listening to me. I'm trying to explain, well, I had to go down there because of this, and I'm still getting in trouble. And I hate those instances. We all hate those instances when we've getting in trouble for something that we shouldn't have been put into in the first place. We're victims of this. Mm-hmm. But at the very end, we do see a version of their dad when the hat is off, and you see plants that have taken over, and there's some on his arm, there's some on the back of his neck, and he's eating plants or eating plant food. And it's never clear which version of the dad it is that they're seeing. Is it the dad who's working on it, or is it the plant that is posing as the dad? At what point do they switch? Has it already switched before the episode, or has it switched somewhere in the middle of the episode? It's never clear as to which one. But at the end, I remember very, very clearly that twist where she's got that weed killer, the plant killer, and both dads are facing, I'm your father, no, I'm your father, blah blah blah, back and forth, and then one calls her princess, and she kills the other one. And again, the DNA has slowly taken over the other one as well, the actual father. So at the end, you think everything's okay, and she starts to go in the house, and there's a bed of plants, and they're talking to her, going, I'm your dad, I'm your real dad, I'm your real dad. And it terrified me as a kid, because I thought, oh crap, you just killed your real dad, which I think was the plot twist that they were supposed to be going for. But as an adult, I'm thinking, that could also still be the villain. That she could have actually killed the villain, but the villain's not dead, and the villain is still somewhat sentient, and he's not gone. He could still torment her and trick her into thinking that it really is the dad. I mean, you could do a part 2 of this, or a part 3, where she finds a way that, I made a terrible mistake, and ends up bringing him back, and it be the villain again. Ooh. So it's never really clear that is the villain or the dad that she destroyed.
Yeah, that ending always never sat well with me, because I'm like, wait a minute, why are you throwing this monkey wrench into here when I thought everything was wrapped up in a bow and they shipped all the plants off to like the university? Now we're dealing with talking flowers that remind me of those like sniffing flowers in Hook that like sniff Robin Williams' crotch. I don't need that in my Goosebumps right now. That's something that I think you're going to talk about more in the final category, but that's something that I feel this Goosebumps episode does really well compared to most other two-parters, save for like Haunted Mask, is that there's just a constant stream of unnerving uncertainty that leaves you on the edge of your seat when you're watching this, not knowing what's going to happen to Margaret and Casey, because Dad's being so secretive, and he could be just having a hidden agenda to keep them, kind of at bay, but we don't really know what he's doing with the experiment. So there's a lot of variables that we're trying to figure out, but don't actually get resolved by the end, which just leaves this episode lingering with us longer after the credits are rolling. And I think both of these episodes do both of that pretty well, but we'll address that more later. There was a question I wanted to say to Courtland. Oh yes, how do you feel about the ending of Stay Out of the Basement? Like, I know it draws similarities, at least in my head, to the ending of The Tale of Chameleons in Are You Afraid of the Dark? So I'm wondering if like one does that kind of doppelganger thing better than the other, in your opinion?
Well, I gotta say, I think Tale of the Chameleons is darker because like that's pretty clear. Like the chameleons just won, and T is in the well. But Stay Out of the Basement, when I watched it, because I got to say, I've seen it once. I didn't go back and watch it yet again. I probably will eventually. But no, I guess that's a lie. I've seen it twice now. But I just thought the talking flowers was stupid. I don't know. I just, like, it happened, and I was just like, is this necessary? Like, it didn't really leave me thinking like, oh, the villain's there, or maybe she killed her dad, and her dad's like, plant stuff. Like, I just thought it was dumb, and that's just me.
Stupid is, stupid does, sir.
Just didn't really. That's coming off of like, Welcome to Camp Nightmare, where it was so many twists, and I'm just like, is this what we're really going to be watching? Like all of these unnecessary twists and stuff.
What a twist!
But like, I mean, when Alex is talking about it, like, I get it. It's not something that I really thought of because I just seen it for face value, and I was just like, God, she's gonna be so annoyed if all these plants are just gonna talk to her all day,
Yeah. Maybe I should go to therapy with the plants.
I don't know. I mean, I would love to talk about the dad some more because I definitely have some thoughts on that.
No, you're good. Good.
My biggest beef with Stay Out of the Basement is the dad, who I think also makes the episode. I think he's a really great actor. He does a really great job. He is menacing. Like, he is scary. And I fully agree. Like, I think this is one of the creepier episodes of Goosebumps, because Goosebumps really is lighter. I think it's a really excellent first step into horror for kids. Are You Afraid of the Dark is probably like a short second step for everybody. The dad really bothers me. And the thing is that he is so menacing to these children, his children, as far as the kids know, because they don't know that the dad is a plant monster, and just the fear in their eyes when the dad is anywhere near them, like that's not something that's new. Like that is the dad's personality. Like they were scared of him before he ever started being a monster, and I think that could be a terrible thing to resonate with some kids in their family lives. And that's what really, like, I saw that and I was just like, this is bad, you know, and it just didn't sit well with me because of that.
No, I was going to say that's an understandable concern.
Yeah, you never want to see your dad as a monster because of how they interact with you, whether it's for disciplinary measures or, you know, maybe just witnessing them flying off the handle in an argument with someone else. You want to be more often than not, you want them to be someone that's your role model, at least until you're through adolescence, so that you can learn and grow through their experiences that you may not necessarily have to repeat. So I'm with you there that the dad is borderline abusive, and it's not a kind of dad I want to have, but I can understand why he's that way to move the plot along and, you know, keep his operation under wraps until he can't anymore.
And they also did say that dad is changing, so this plant dad could have changed pre-episode.
You're right. It's just like when I see those kind of like just the fear and great acting on Margaret's character, just the fear that she sees in her eyes anytime the dad is like near her in KC. It's just like that level is like something that is long just chiseled into them, you know, like this is behavior that is not good. And I can see that resonating with kids that are watching this that might not be in great homes and be like, oh, that's how my dad treats me too, you know. That's just my feelings on it. But, you know, I do appreciate them saying like, oh, dad's changing. And they do kind of like redeem themselves a little bit later on when he calls her princess. And she's like, oh, it's my dad again. I love him. You know, so like, I feel like he can change and grow and be a better person.
Yeah, grow.
That's what he's been doing.
But also, I will say too, you know, talking about dad again, this change from the dad being like the plant dad, you know, the swap, it must not have been that long ago, because in the story he still has dad just chilling in the basement as a captive. He's not like, you know, a skeleton on the ground or anything. So like the timeline of things, it's not that long. So again, like that fear of dad has been instilled at them for a long time.
No, totally understandable.
Yeah. Like, can you imagine, like, so scared that you have to sit there and be like, oh God, I have to rewind the tape or else dad is going to beat me. You know, like, you know, these kids have been living in a really abusive relationship for a long time.
Yeah, definitely would not want to be there. Okay, moving on. I think.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go there.
That's okay.
It's okay.
I mean, it's expected with the subject matter. So, is there any final thoughts you have on the villains before we move to use of the basement theme?
Nope.
I think they're both good, both spooky, both menacing. I like them.
Cool. Alrighty, so we're moving on to our fourth category, the use of the basement theme, whether that's actually taking place in a basement or involving the things that are inside the basement to, you know, tie up the story in a bow. Courtland, start.
Yeah. So I thought a little bit about this kind of category for it. Honestly, the Tale of the Dark music, the basement is kind of the focal point of the episode. It's where all the action happens. It's where the monster dwells. You don't really see a lot of the basement, though. You know, he does laundry, like I said, like 6 times or whatever in the episode. So you see the laundry part of the basement, and then you see the root cellar. And I know they do like a stairs down into the basement, which is actually how my basement was when I was growing up. So I can kind of relate to that part of it. But there's not a lot of basement, you know? It doesn't really focus a lot on everything else. It's just kind of the root cellar door.
Yeah, I think when we first go down there, we see like a quick pan of what's there, but even so, it's hard
all
to really
junk.
pick out. Yeah,
there's a hand in there. That's all I know.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know how they got all that stuff in the basement, or if it's just all their uncle's crap that well, I guess he doesn't know, he's dead, so he didn't move any of it out. They were just like, keep the rest of the basement stuff. The next family can deal with it.
Have an estate sale, you know, they can deal with the cellar door demon.
35! It is divina.
50.
I have $50,000.
Your turn, my ecstasy.
50,000 going once, 50,000 going twice.
Alex, tell us about the use of the basement theme and how it applies to Stay Out of the Basement, other than the title.
So a bit of a side tangent. I, in a way, became that father on this episode because we had in the home we had before on our very first Splat Attack episode and second one, I had a man cave in our old home, and when Sam was really, really small, he'd want to go down there, and I had a Mario Brothers shrine, this bookcase full of just a bunch of trinkets and toys and things, and he wasn't allowed to play with them, and he would go down there. He only time he was allowed to go down in the basement was with I was there with him, so I could make sure that he wasn't messing with things he wasn't supposed to. Every once in a while, I'd hear that door open, and then I'd turn around and yell, "Stay out of the basement!"
Title drop.
Yeah, and but I also remember doing a lot of projects in the basement as well, making a lot of props and toys for kids at church and different games and things. And the reason I bring that up is because that's pretty much what was happening in this episode. We don't really see the basement because the basement is a jungle. This became his project. This became his big experiment, and it quite literally outgrew its environment to the point where it was going out of the window on the outside and getting to Casey. You do get those creepy vibes when they first try to go down the stairs, and you see from the basement looking up, and you see their silhouettes, and then Dad pops up behind them and yells at them, even though they're like 3 feet in front of him. The basement is very, very brightly lit in green, and it's just it ties in. It's going to tie in with Creepiness, but the bulk of the episodes, both episodes, are not necessarily in the basement, but what is taking place in the basement is the main focal, like what same with what Courtland had said. But I think we see more of it in these 2 episodes, which you should, because you have more time to be able to flesh this story out, and you see more of the plants that are moving, and you can see them reaching for them. Whenever I first watched it as a kid, I didn't see that the plants were reaching out for these kids. Whenever I just saw it as, they were brushing past or fans were blowing it or something. Watching it now again, it's like, yeah, you can. I know what they're doing. I know what this episode is, and I can see that the plants are slowly trying to reach for them, and you see the breathing and all this really awkward and uncomfortable atmosphere. I don't think that the basement in Tale of the Dark Music is creepy outside of that one room, whereas this entire room, the entire basement, because of this project that has overgrown its environment, is probably more so. But both, I think, have utilized the basement in pretty much the same capacity.
Yeah, it's a good trap, if anything else, for victims.
It's a Venus flytrap.
I'd like to add, I mean, the basement in Stay Out of the Basement is kind of more the things that go on there can kind of traverse a little bit more than they can in Tale of the Dark Music, because Tale of the Dark Music, the monster can only be in the basement. We don't see him out of the basement, but in Stay Out of the Basement, like, the plants come up outside of the house to grab KC at one point. The dad monster can go anywhere he pleases, so it's like the basement is everywhere.
Yeah, it can exceed its bounds if it needs to, versus like the cellar door demon is just confined to his own comfort zone.
Yeah, he needs those sacrifices to come to me, whereas if this continues to grow and stay out of the basement, and they perfected this experiment to where you can do more of these sentient things, it can quite easily take over.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Dad can go and dig worms anywhere he wants. Yeah.
I'm the wormy guy.
Either that, or if you want to move the cellar door demon, maybe do a pentagram in someone else's root cellar or game room and see if they show up.
You have to create this noise, walkway. You have to, okay, flip the radio. Okay, he's coming upstairs. Make sure there's music in every room he can be in.
Make sure you blast some Van Halen so that he knows where to show up. Play like Eruption.
Running with the devil.
Yeah, Running with the Devil and Eruption, and it's going to be a good time for him.
I gotta say, the music in Dark Music is so bad.
I don't care. I love it.
I do. Look, I do too, but man, is it awful.
You got like some nice, easy adult contemporary, and you got some early '90s rock, and man, I don't know how the Cellar Door Demon would react today if he heard like some of today's pop hits or some other genre that he's not used to. Like with that,
sacrifice me instead. Someone,
yeah, right?
Kill me.
Would the genre affect the way he manifests himself as a different form? That's something I've always wondered.
What would he turn into with lo-fi?
A raccoon just doing his homework. Is there anything you would change about each respective basement to enhance it for the story?
Not that I can think of. Not from mine.
I don't think so. There's really not. I feel like again with dark music, there's really nothing that would really need to be expanded.
Okay.
And like I said with Stay Out of the Basement, the creatures from the basement can expand themselves. They can go wherever they want.
Alrighty. Well, we're going to move on to our final category, which I'm sure many of you can relate to, is creepiness. So, Courtland, tell us why the Tale of the Dark music is creepy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just the basement. You can incorporate other elements as well if you'd like.
God, I mean, the monster alone, just being able to shapeshift into other things is just so creepy to me. I love shape-shifting monsters, though, I gotta say, and just the imagination that you can spark from it is just so cool. The doll, though, you guys. The doll. You see her? You see that monstrosity right there? I mean, come on.
Come on, Andy, let's go play.
The creepiness level, so creepy.
Yeah.
So
just the way she moves, it's like she's got this weird floatiness, like she's being puppeted by the dark music. Like maybe the Cellar Door Demon just has a hand behind her that allows her to move her mouth like a ventriloquist dummy. I have no idea.
I mean, we don't even need to talk about like the carnival barker or anything like this.
And his fake green
doll
screen.
Alone. Yeah. Oh my God. I just yeah, she says it all. I don't have to do anything because she's behind me.
Ugh.
Being creepy.
Yeah, I don't even want to see her in like my bedroom. I don't want to see her in my sister's bedroom. I don't want to see her at the beach. Like any setting, it's a giant life-size creepy doll that wants you to go play with her. Nope, get out of here.
Well, that's super disturbing.
I know when I talked to, I don't remember if I talked to Ron Oliver about the doll specifically or if he did it in another interview, but I think they took inspiration from like at the French side of French Canada, and that's where this monstrosity was born. And,
yeah, he actually mentioned in our 30th anniversary reunion that they got a lady at a hotel who worked at the front desk. Her name's Fofi Satas, to do the voice of her because he and DJ were like, you're perfect. Just happened to have that right austerity to her, and she ended up doing this as her only role. So something about the high-pitched innocent voice with like the porcelain hollowness of this doll really worked for this scene.
I love it. It's just so good. It's so creepy. I don't have anything else to say. The doll.
Alex, tell us about the creepiness of your tale.
Well, the basement is not as creepy. It's the plants that are in the basement that are creepy. I was trying to think of what I would have found more creepy to walk through if I was a kid and I had to go through both basements. And not because I'm saying it's my episode, but I think the basement and Stay Out of the Basement is probably creepier because it's not limited to one door. Mm-hmm. And also there's a weakness. I can have music. This one, no, everything is alive and everything is reaching for you and you don't know what they can do. I mean, there was even a hand at one point, a plant hand, and you saw people's faces inside the plants, and one even reached out and grabbed hold of Margaret's hand, and like we had said, they grew out of the building and through the windows, and that is eerie. I would not want to even open the door. I wouldn't even want to go near the door if I was knowing how terrified I was of things as a kid. And that's just the basement. Dad is creepy. Dad has remained creepy. I mean, from the very get-go, with him just yelling at them at the very beginning of the episode to stay out of the basement, and then has this really unnerving authoritarian persona, attitude. And like I said earlier, my word is the end all be all in this house. You will do what I say. That's terrifying, because I'm sure most people have dealt with or have seen someone like this, and they are very intimidating. It's not something you want to come across. And also, again, those instances of when you've put in a situation you don't want to be in, but here you are and you're doing your best and you're still getting in trouble for doing what you know you should be doing. That's not only frustrating, but it's also scary, because what's going to happen next? And then the eeriness of the fact that there's a potential dead body in my house, and what am I going to do about that? Dad's killed somebody. There's a lot of just unnerving stuff, and the twist ending is unnerving. That's the one thing I remembered most. The whole thing is creepy. It's just unrelenting creep factor from the very beginning. Mom leaves, and then it's just creepy, and it just ramps up the more and more and more you learn about it. But especially that basement, especially that anything in that basement could catch you and mess with you, and that there's a dead body somewhere, and then you've got this dad who's not my dad, and how do I get out of this without him becoming wise to the fact that I'm on to him, and he's already on to me. It's all around.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot to experience with the creepiness there, and it never really lets up, even from the beginning. Just something that I find interesting is, if Andy and Margaret were to swap places, how would you feel they would react differently to the basement that they're put in?
I think Andy would bail him run.
You wouldn't try to fight it or come up with a plan?
I don't think so.
I think that Margaret would figure it out quicker than Andy did.
Mm-hmm.
I think she would. I think she figured out the music thing a little bit quicker.
And how would she use it once she realizes that the music triggers the door?
I don't think that she would succumb to the darkness like Andy does. I don't think she would. I don't think she would have. Yeah, I don't think she would have intentionally brought doom upon another human being. I think she's too wholesome for that.
Yeah. It sounds like they were miscast and should have been in each other's tails then. Cool. Well, we're gonna take a commercial break just to stretch our arms and have some plant food for a quick snack. But when we return, we will go over the final verdict and do our segments for the day.
Will be
right back.
It's telekinetic. It's telepathic. It's television of a new dimension.
Whatever this thing is, it's big.
It's The Tomorrow People, the first sci-fi series from the First Kids Network. And next Saturday, it's the start of a totally new adventure. The Culex Experiment. A science project gone bad. A scientist gone mad. And 4 kids doing everything in their power to stop them. The Tomorrow People, teleporting to your TV. Next Saturday at 6/5 Central, only on Nick.
The weather is getting colder, the days are getting shorter, and the snow is coming down. This means that Brett and I are going to go back to Nick Jr. to talk about 2 classic Little Bear episodes with Kristen, the voice of Little Bear. You will only find this episode available on our Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/SplatAttack to gain access to this bonus episode and all of our previous episodes as well. Have a happy winter, and we hope to see you there.
And now, back to our show. Yay.
All right, we're back. We got plenty of plant food in our bellies, and we listened to some easy listening tunes on our basement stereo. So let's do a quick recap to see who's going to win this bad boy, shall we? So starting off with story, both of them have different approaches to to putting kid characters into a basement and having them have to deal with the circumstances that they're dealt with relating to the adults. I feel that Andy is pretty much, he's a character that does grow, not necessarily in a good direction. As you mentioned, Courtland, he kind of turns to the dark side at the end because it's just his way of coping with all the bullying and the lack of support he's getting. It's actually very reminiscent of, I think his name is Ricky from our Calling All Creeps versus.
He is. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, if you were in his situation, you would probably do the same thing because you have no one but yourself to rely on when you're dealing with high stakes. Likewise with Mark and Casey, I think they work pretty well as a pair of, super sleuthing around to see what Dad's up to, although they didn't get too many answers out of him. It was just kind of duck and hide or red light, green light, where they try to get a little bit farther, but then they're set back or frozen into place with the way he one-ups them and keeps them at bay. So it's a tough one for me. I like both of the stories for different reasons. I really like how unnerving the Stay Out of the Basement story is throughout. It really keeps you on edge for Goosebumps' tale. Dark music, it kind of just ramps up and goes all out near the end, building to a climax with Coda succumbing to the cellar door demon and Andy harnessing the power of the door. I think I'm going to give it a draw because I just like them both too much on equal level to really split hairs. So the score is 1-1 for each side. Moving on to main characters, we have Margaret and Casey, mainly on Stay Out of the Basement, which, as I mentioned previously, they work fairly well together. Sometimes they get a little bit of banter. They're not kids who would easily shy away from a challenge, which I appreciate. Like, even if they have to go back to their rooms or talk about things before they go into the basement, it's never like, I can't deal with this, I'm out of here, and they just run out and the story's over after 10 minutes. I like how they're trying to figure things out even if they're constantly set back, and it makes me root for them in their scenario. As for Andy, he doesn't have much to go off of except his own wits, and it's really trial and error for him because the first few times he doesn't get it. He's like in a trance when first he's scared when he meets the cellar door demon for the first time, and then he's like lured in the next couple of times like a weird trance or some sort of mysterious force suspending his disbelief. But like by the time he gets the hang of it, all he can think about is really just channeling all that hurt and that pain that he's dealt with through the bullying, through being ignored, through being teased and taunted, and just I guess succumbing to his weaknesses as a result. I don't think he's better off as a character at the end, but I understand why he did the things he did, and I do see a lot of comparisons of him between like Anakin Skywalker when he turned to the dark side around like episode 3 of Star Wars. So I think for likability, I got to give it to Stay Out of the Basement, just because I think they were more calm and collected with how they handled this situation and didn't let their emotions get the best of them. Moving on to villain, we have Dr. Brewer from Stay Out of the Basement, who is a very threatening dad. I wouldn't want to cross his path because I have met dads in the past who like you just didn't want to go near because you can feel the anger radiating from them even when they're just neutral. He's a character that I think people can identify with in the sense that if you become consumed by your work, you start to turn into a different person. Like when it goes from, I'm being productive to I'm being obsessed and I'm sacrificing everything else in my life to get to that point, then you wonder where his morals lie when he has his blinders on, even at the expense of, yelling at his kids, which is trauma-inducing, and I recommend that there are better ways to handle parenting than to just shout at them and refuse to answer their questions. So I really dislike him as a character, but that works in his favor as being a villain because no dad should ever want to be like Dr. Brewer, whatever their profession is. Yep. As for the Tale of the Dark music, We have Coda and the Cellar Door Demon kind of tag teaming things here. And, you know, you got Coda just being like what's the word? Provocateur, someone who provokes somebody. He's really good at like pushing Andy to the brink of his sanity. And you have the Door, who's just trying to pull every trick out of its bag in order to get what it wants, which is to feed on humans for whatever reason, whether it's just hungry or gains its power from devouring souls. We don't know for sure. But I like the mysteriousness of the Cellar Door a lot. It really leaves a lot to the imagination. Obviously, we've only seen a small helping of what it can become, and it could also turn into many other things, I'm sure, if we gave it a sequel or a prequel, depending on what its true motives were, or even if there's a world beyond the door that, you know, the Cellar Door Demon's just a gatekeeper for in that dark void. And I like the mysterious aspect of that a lot. I wouldn't say it's necessarily as aggressive as Dr. Brewer. Like, Dr. Brewer actually frightens me because of that element of realism and how he relates to, like, just hate-filled people. But I like the fantasy aspect of the Cellar Door, and it would scare me if it happened to be in a dark, unfinished part of a basement at a friend's house that I would visit. So I'm actually going to give this one a tie as well. So I believe it's Stayed Out of Basement 3, Dark Music 2. Moving on to the basement theme. Both of them have like a very different take on it. You got the typical 90s basement that's unfinished, full of junk. We've seen other iterations of this basement, and even different Are You Afraid of the Dark tales, like the Tale of the Night and the Neighbors, for example, or I'm trying to think of another basement. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, it was take away. This is a ton of them.
Yeah. I think basements naturally lend themselves to being eerie and unsettling, but it's a place that is a breeding ground for fear-inducing type lore of that sort. So I like the realism of dark music because it just feels like anyone's basement, because somehow having that relatability and the down-to-earth feeling makes what happens with the creature all the more terrifying. Like, it's a stark contrast between these manifestations of it and just this background versus, like, Dr. Brewer blends in more with his plant jungle that's happening down there, because he is becoming part of it due to his obsession. He's part plant, whether it's the real one or not. So it really just comes down to what atmosphere that you prefer when experiencing each of these stories. If you want something more down to earth, go with dark music. If you want something a little more extravagant and, I guess, sciencey or nature based, stay out of the basement. So I'm gonna give this one a tie as well. And I hope I don't end this in a tie, because we've had like one or two ties already in verses. So I gotta get a little more nitpicky about this last one. So for the final category of creepiness, I define creepy as something that could cause your, like... I see what you're doing.
For those who are listening, Courtland was pointing to the doll.
So the reason why I named this category creepy instead of scary is because I feel creepy is more about an atmosphere and lingering feelings than it is about something that kind of hits you in the moment. Like scariness often does with its jump scares, and I think both of these do them fairly well, just different styles. So with dark music, you have, climactic swells of drama and eeriness through the persona of the Cellar Door Demon. And it doesn't really extend out from the basement itself. Like when we're outside, you don't feel anything's creepy. You don't feel anything creepy with the mom. I guess there's a hint of it when Andy's drawing the door in the living room at night while she's putting on those weird blind shade things. Oh, I hate those. I have a pair myself. But it's very self-contained, and I wish there was a little bit more going on with the creepiness there. I do appreciate the doll. I appreciate the carnival barker who turns into a skeleton, because that was one of the very first memories of Are You Afraid of the Dark I've ever had burned into my memory, was that skeleton going, "Oh yeah!" like he's the Kool-Aid Man or something. But then you also have the creepiness of the basement and Stay Out of the Basement, and I feel I would easily get lost in there in a heartbeat. Like, it's just a labyrinth of vines and ivy and plant-like appendages that are all coming out of a different end. It's basically like an overgrown bush gardens where anything could attack you if you get too close to it. And as much as I feel threatened by the cellar door demon, with its like different manifestations of itself, it just doesn't quite have the same punch for me as Stay Out of the Basement, because the plants being just like this omnipresent threat that could really do anything at a moment's notice, combined with like the aggressiveness of the dad, that adds a lot to the creepiness and the lingering feelings of even after watching it, especially with that weird the end question mark happening where you got the flowers talking to Margaret, and we thought everything was wrapped up in a bow after the plants were sent to the university, and Dad's like, I'm not going to do this again. But because of that little twist, it just leaves more room for interpretation, and maybe potentially taking it a step further to see what Margaret does to handle those talking flowers to her. So I got to give it to Stay Out of the Basement, and I think that means that our winner is Stay Out of the Basement for this Versus.
Well done. Well done, Courtland. Well done. Well done. Well done.
Yeah, you know what though? I would still rather watch Tale of the Dark Music.
I would too. Believe me, it's one of my favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes, if not my favorite. But I had a hard time arguing against Stay Out of the Basement just because of how many things that really off-put me about it in like the context of these categories. Yeah. And there is one thing that I mentioned in the past a couple of times: when we do verses, we don't actually rate our verses because they're distinctly different from our episode battles. So the reason why I designed this format this way for our podcast is because if we want to go more in depth with this, so say, for example, down the road, I actually want to do an episode review of the Tale of the Dark Music, we can go more into it, and the versus battle doesn't affect the outcome of our rating of it. Because if this was an actual episode review of Tale of the Dark Music, I could give it triple S easily, because I just love it that much. Stay Out of the Basement, I give more like a B, because I hate the dad so much. So it's like different structures allow it to get the head here and there. So
but it's making a more objective comparison.
Yeah.
Based on these criteria, which one is the better episode?
I will say too, I mean, you guys brought up a lot of really fantastic points and things that I really kind of overlooked too. It was fun though. I liked it.
I'm glad you participated with us. Well, let's not jump the gun too quick. I know we want to get out of these creepy ass basements, but we still have a few segments to go through. So bear with me, and if a plant tries to snag you into the cellar door demon's door, just use Ricky Winter's Uzi from the Tale of the Bookish Babysitter.
How about this? They ran down to the basement where he kept his Uzi. Yeah, his Uzi! Just in case of attacks by knights, ghosts, and other nasty things.
All right. There's another episode. They went in the basement in that one.
Yeah, briefly. That was a creepy basement too, full of junk. So we're going to do our versus exclusive segment, Rename Game. Okay, so for Rename Game, the rules are pretty simple. What do you feel is a better fitting title for each of our respective episodes? I know some of them are pretty well titled already, some of them not so much. It really depends on the episode that we review in these verses. But in this case, Courtland, what would you rename the Tale of the Dark Music?
That's a tough one. I really like the name, The Tale of the Dark Music. I think it really encapsulates everything that goes on in the episode, especially as it compares to the demon. I don't know. That's a tough one, you know. I know that we do these in like our episodes for our podcast. I have no idea what I told or what I said during that one because it was years ago when we did it. But
yeah,
I don't know. Do you want funny or do you want like serious ones?
Whichever, either one.
Whatever you want.
The Tale of the Endless Laundry.
The Tale of Too Many Tarps.
Oh, that's a good one.
I went with a more literary sounding tale. So, if I was in Eric's shoes telling this tale at the Midnight Society campfire, I would rename it The Tale of the Cellar Door Dweller.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
I really liked focusing on that door, and I've once heard, at least on the Donnie Darko movie, that cellar door is like one of the most pleasing sounding phrases in all of English literature. So I really wanted to play with the words there to make it sound mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
And for Stay Out of the Basement, Alex, what would you rename Stay Out of the Basement to be a better fit?
The Root of All Evil.
Ooh.
That's a good one. I like it.
Or the root cellar of all evil. Yeah, both of those are pretty good. So I'm going to rename Stay Out of the Basement Trapped in Chlorophyll's Basement Jungle, because I definitely felt like it was some sort of crazy jungle when I was watching it as a kid and as an adult that I feel like I would find no way out of, even with a compass and a flashlight. So I feel it's fitting, and it could also be like the name of a band if you want to get crazy.
Chlorophyll, and it's nothing but it's nothing but a YouTube band that plays like those 8-hour loops that you play to go to sleep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. For those who don't know, I wrote chlorophyll as in like chloral hyphen Phil, as in like the name Phil. Little wordplay there again. It's funny you mentioned that, because when I was a kid and listening to like 90s grunge in my grandma's car one day, she showed one of these local bands to me, and she's like, "Ooh, I know you like my Uncle Phil's music and you like Nirvana. How do you feel about this band that's like near us?" And their band's name was Pete Moss and the Fertilizers.
Love it.
Yeah, I want to see them play. Get all down and dirty with the plant dudes. So yeah, we'll recap once again for our audience what our titles are. So for Tale Dark Music,
Tale of the Endless Laundry,
and The Tale of the Cellar Door Dweller. That's a tongue twister. And for Stay Out of the Basement, we have
The Root of All Evil,
and Trapped in Chlorophyll's Basement Jungle. We'll have all you Slimesters vote for your favorite title on Instagram, and we will share the poll in our next verses or next episode, really whenever we think of it. Wow, that rename game was a lot of fun. I didn't expect all those answers to come up, but I like the sound of all of them. So before we're going to close out today, we actually have another couple of Mona's mailbag letters to read. I found an extra bag down here in the basement, so let's see what TV Gamer and Nostalgic Millennial Podcast have to say about Splat Attack.
These are for you!
So this first letter comes from TV Gamer, and it's titled Guts 30th Anniversary. Hey guys, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Guts on September 19th, I watched your Guts podcast on YouTube and watched a marathon of Guts on Paramount Plus that day. I really enjoyed the episode, especially when you interviewed Kristen. If I was a contestant on Guts, I would want my color to be purple and my nickname to be Game Guy. I like to play video games and watch game shows, and I'm a guy as well. Also because I got game. To me, Guts equals having courage and playing. My favorite Guts events are the pool events. I do enjoy watching contestants splash in water. My favorite non-pool events are Slam Dunk and Zero G as well. I like basketball, and it'd be more fun while bungee jumping. It would be very cool to feel like you are floating on air. I have 2 items from the Guts merchandise. I took a photo of me wearing my Guts t-shirt and holding my Guts drawstring bag while standing in front of my basketball hoop. Please see attached photos. TV Gamer. Wow, TV Gamer, that looks really great. I'm glad that you're supportive of our podcast and also have some cool Guts merchandise to share, because I know they came out with quite a few bit of interesting items over the years. So thank you very much for writing to us, and we apologize that we got to this letter late, because I know you had sent it to us a few weeks earlier. This next letter comes from Nostalgic Menio Podcast, and it is actually our latest review on Apple Podcasts. I figure we'd show these to you because we really do enjoy hearing from anyone, no matter where it comes from. Whether you write to us via email, send us a review, or comment on YouTube, that's something really poignant. So here's what Nostalgic Millennial Podcast has to say about us. The title is Required Supplement for a 90s Nick Fan. In the Splat Attack podcast, Brett and Alex pay homage to the Nickelodeon source material while enhancing a fan's experience of the same. They do this through legendary interviews of game show contestants, actors, and superfans. They also offer commentary and other various fun segments. All of their material is additionally presented in professionally edited video, which enhances the audio experience with great visuals. You'll notice their abundant passion for the spirit of Nickelodeon with just a single listen. Nickelodeon lore is in good hands here. Matt and Paul of the Nostalgic Millennial Podcast. Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate you taking the time to write that review for us. And if anyone else is listening and just haven't had the chance to, head on over to Apple Podcasts. It only takes a couple minutes. Write something nice about us if you really enjoy our podcast, or if you think we have some problems that really need addressing or fixing, write us a review about that as well. It doesn't really matter whether we get 5 or 1 stars. What's more important is that we're connecting with our audience and we're making the necessary changes to make our podcast more encompassing and more engaging with you guys. And that concludes our Mona's Mailbag segment.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. We love you.
Here's our closing question, Slimesters, so we can get out of this musty basement and clean up after the massacre that was our verses. So, Slimesters, let us know. What do you imagine a proper sequel or prequel to either of these stories to look like? If you have some interesting ideas, feel free to let us know via email at splatattack2021@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at splatattackpodcast, or even let us know in the comments section of this episode on YouTube, which is Splat Attack Podcast for our channel. We did touch upon some ideas with what we talked about during our verses, so if you even want to play with those and take it further, go for it. We love seeing our audience interact with us, so. And if it interests you, let us know and we'll share it in a future Mona's Mailbag episode. Tune in next time, Slimesters, as we get wrapped up in cocoons that meddle with an evil scientist in our miniseries review of The Tomorrow People, the Culex Experiment. It'll be an exciting conclusion to Season 3 of our podcast because we'll be covering another 5-part miniseries. Just like our first miniseries arc of The Tomorrow People, The Origin Story, which was episode 23 way back in Season 2 of our podcast. You won't want to miss this because it's a very exciting story, and we may or may not have a guest for that, so keep your eyes peeled. Without further ado, Alex, will you drain the slime tank for us, please? After seeing Andy interact with it, I must head deeper into the mysterious cellar door to see where it leads.
Aye, co-captain. Stay away from skeleton carnies and life-size dolls while you're in there.
Yeah. Pray I make it out on the other side, Alex. Are you coming with me?
No way, Jose. I'd rather water my dad-sized houseplant instead.
Well, suit yourself. Splat you later, Slimesters.
Let us know if you find Coda while you're in there. I'm gonna play video games with Christina upstairs.
I'll keep that in mind.
Bye.
Yo, Brett, come on in.
Back out! Back out!
Yep, get out of here. Get out of here.
Reprise the theme song and roll the credits.
Hard to believe, folks, but it's time to say goodbye.
Nighty-night.
Hey, check us out next time for more adventure and another great legend of the Hidden Temple.
What'll we do till then?
Chill for a couple. We'll be back.
You're on, Nick.
And it was time for the superhero to move on.
I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society closed.
Bye-bye.
You in the basement?
We heard some noises. Like someone was crying. Dad? Dad! That's not Dad! No, stop! Casey, let go of me! What's wrong with you? It's Dad! It can't be Dad!
What's the matter, Andy? Don't you want to have some fun?
You
to do one thing.